Deathbed must know the body form changes in rebirth. However, the Buddhist nature remains constant. Respectfully compiled by Li Pen Chao. Background. Whenever I heard that a relative or a classmate or a friend had died, I told myself I should write a brief summary of my knowledge concerning death from the sutras and from Buddhist scholars. I want those who are still alive to realize that we have to take death seriously. We should not avoid this subject because it is awkward or uncomfortable to talk about. If we let nature take its course or die of unawareness, the consequence is very grave indeed. For the sake of our destiny in the next life, we owe it to ourselves to have a clear idea of death, to take it with great precaution, and be well prepared for it in advance. Our existence as a human being in this life is then not completely wasted. Brief description of birth and death. Buddha said, everyone has 8 consciousnesses. The first 5 are eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. The 6th is yi, consciousness. The 7th is manas, also called transporting consciousness. The 8th is alaya, also called storage consciousness. In birth, the 8th consciousness is the first one to come. The 7th, the 6th, and the remaining 5s come in order later. In death, the 8th consciousness is the last one to leave the body. The others leave before in order. Then, the last to leave, the first to come, 8th consciousness, is merely giving up its present body form and is reborn into another new body form. Do you ever wonder where is the actually birth and death of the 8th consciousness? There is none whatsoever. This consciousness is also called a human soul, spirit, or ghost. The alaya consciousness will not leave the body until the body is completely cold. Usually, it takes about 8 to 24 hours after all the vital signs are gone. When the 8th consciousness leaves the body then becomes senseless. If the body feels even a tiny bit of warmth, this consciousness is still there. Any touching of the dead, he/she will still feel an unbearable amount of pain. In turn, this touching will result in a great deal of hatred and indignation from the deceased. Dao Zhang Dharma teacher was an oncologist before she decided to become a Buddhist priest. In her Learn Medicine and Learn Buddhism, she told us a story about one of her young female cancer patients who had made a decision to be a vegetarian and asked to be born in the Western happiest world in her next life. One night, the patient came to her hospital for an emergency procedure. It failed and she died. When she went to work in the morning, one of the nurses paged her to the patient's room. She noticed the patient, who already was breathless, showed no pulse and had no blood pressure. She then said to the patient, "Please concentrate and follow me to chant Amitofo, Buddha Amita in Chinese." After a while of chanting, unexpectedly, tears rolled down all over the patient's cheeks. She called the attention of nurses at once and said to them, "Buddhist Dharma told us, even when a patient stops breathing, the eighth consciousness is still there." Tears flew down her cheeks as I recited Buddha Amita, and also as I talked to her. Was she dead? Her eighth consciousness is still there. Please be sure to treat the so-called dead kindly. Therefore, when the heart rate has ceased, no pulse is detected, and breathing has stopped, it does not mean the patient is really dead. Reincarnation and the 6 divisions of existence, or seeking immortality. In general, if one practices the 10 good deeds with one's earnest effort, one will be born to heavens of lust realm, which consists of 6 stories of heavens. In one's next life, regardless of one's background, if one wants to be born into the heavens of form realm, 18 stories of heavens, or formless realm, 4 stories of heavens, in addition to performing the best of 10 good deeds, one has to practice dhyana, meditation. On the other hand, if one carries out the 10 worst evil deeds throughout one's life, one will probably be sunk to hell as a result. Therefore, there is no Buddha, no Bodhisattva, and no God to reward one to heaven for happiness or to punish one to hell for suffering. It is all because one reaps what one sows. Sutra says, if one wants to know what were the causes of one's past lives, everything one is going through, good or bad, throughout the present life, are some of the effects of those causes. If one wants to know what will be the effects in one's future life, everything one does, good or bad, in the present life, are to be the future causes of those effects. Thus is the cause, thus is the effects, Sutra says. Bodhisattva fears cause, secular being is afraid of effect. There are 28 stories of heaven. The higher story is better. The beings in the 28th story can enjoy a life of happiness for 80,000 big eons. However, they are still governed by the suffering of rebirth in the 6 divisions of existence, just like everyone else once they die. If one decides to terminate the birth and death, one should seek immortality. With no birth, there will be no death. This is the only way to end one's birth and death permanently. Buddha Shakyamuni was exceptionally kind and taught us the special PURELAND Dharma school. The essences of the school are belief, willingness, and chanting only the name of Buddha Amita. Belief. I believe the world I live in is full of suffering, and the Western happiest world is filled with joy. I believe a secular being like me cannot get rid of all the vexations with my own effort, and in turn end the birth and death myself. I trust that Buddha Amita made great vows. If anyone recites the name of Buddha Amita and asks to be born into his world, the Buddha will come to take him or her to his paradise just before he or she dies. Once one is born there, one will never fall back as a human being or any other divisions of existence again. Not only will one's rebirth thus permanently terminate, but most importantly, one will live forever. Willingness. I am willing to depart this suffering world and go for the happiest world as soon as possible. practice. Constantly recite Buddha Amita or Namo Buddha Amita with one's utmost sincerity all the time. O ye great teacher said, whether one can be or cannot be successfully born in the West, it is entirely depending on if one has or does not have the belief and the willingness. What kind of status, upper, middle, or lower, one will be born into, it depends solely on the practice of the recitation of the Buddha, deeply or shallowly. At the same time, one must always practice filial piety, fraternity, loyalty, trustworthiness, propriety, justice, incorruption, and a sense of shame. One has to discard the morally bad and keep only the righteous thoughts. Never commit any evil doing and always perform good deeds. Therefore, to have a no rebirth life, one must have the belief, the willingness, chant the name of Buddha Amita, and offer all the merits from the chanting, blessings from the good deeds to oneself and everyone else as well for the birth in the West. The chance to be reborn again as a human being in the next life is extremely small. One day, Buddha scooped a handful of soil and asked Ananda, "Where has more soil, in my hand or in the great earth?" Ananda answered, "The great earth." Then the Buddha said to Ananda, "The opportunity to be reborn as a human being in the next life is like the soil in my hand. The loss to be as a human being in the next life is similar to the soil in the great earth." The Venerable Yingguang Dharma teacher told us, to ask to be born in the paradise is easier than to seek again as a human being in the next life. This is because of relying heavily on Buddha Amita's powerful blessing. The existence of Buddhism in this world is about 12,000 years and is divided into 3 periods. First is the proper Dharma age, which lasts about 1,000 years or 500 years, according to others. Then the Dharma-like age, which lasts about another 1,000 years. The final is the Dharma ending age, whose duration is about 10,000 years. After all sutras vanish, only the Infinite Life Sutra will stay for an additional 100 years. After that, there will be no more Buddhism in the world for people to learn and practice. So far, about 3,000 years have passed, and we have about 9,000 years left in the Dharma ending age. The next Buddha in line will be the Buddha Maitreya, who is now living in the inner courtyard of the Tushita heaven as a Bodhisattva. At 4,000 Tushita heaven years, which is about 576 million years of our time, he will come down and become a Buddha. Therefore, at the end of 9,000 years of the Dharma ending period, and before Buddha Maitreya comes down, there will be no more Buddha and Buddhism in this world. It is indeed a very long time for people to have a chance to learn Buddhism again. An ancient scholar said, rebirth as a human being again in our next life is definitely very rare. But we are fortunate enough to be a human being now. Buddhism is hard to come by, but we are lucky to have it right now. If one still does not want to terminate one's birth and death in the present life, then which human life cycle is one really waiting for? Preparation before death. If one has not prepared a will now is the time to do it. Once everything is taken care of and settled, one should never look back. If the illness is not too serious, one can still take the medicine, but do not even wish that the medicine will work. Keep one's mind only with thoughts of the belief, the willingness, and the recitation of Buddha Amita, and ask to be born in his paradise. This way, if one is destined to die, one will certainly be born to the West. Or if one is not doomed to die, one may get well sooner than expected from the illness. As a result of chanting the Buddha Amita with one's utmost devotion, some of one's lifetime bad karmas will disappear. If one recites the name of the Buddha, on the one hand, secretly one wishes the medicine will work to one's benefit, and one may have a chance to live a longer life. Then one has no chance to be born to the West because one's belief and willingness are not really that sincere. If the patient is at its terminal stage, then do not take the medicine anymore. If one's life is predetermined to die, how can a doctor and some medicine save one from dying? This action will disturb the patient's concentration to recite the name of the Buddha. Hong Yi Dharma teacher was once sick, and friends advised him to see a doctor. He said, Buddha Amita is the supreme physician. If I do not beg him and beg someone else, that is dumb and idiotic. A chanting of Buddha Amita is the best medicine that can cure all. If I do not do the chanting, I will then make the greatest mistake. It does not make any difference if the patient is a monk or a sentient being or someone who practices the chanting regularly or someone who does not do it all. As long as the deathbed patient decides before his or her last breath to believe the PURELAND sect wholeheartedly, is overwhelmingly willing to be born there, and recites the name of the Buddha sincerely, the Buddha will come to welcome this person to the West personally, regardless of his or her background. In case the suffering of the illness for someone who practices the chanting becomes unbearable at the last stage of his life, it means a moment of severe suffering now pays up some major punishments for his past bad karmas in the future. The critical importance of the last thought. The last thought of a deathbed is the determining factor for someone for where he or she will be born. Reincarnation in the 6 divisions of existence or born into the West Paradise, it is an extremely critical time. Similar to a 1,000-pound rock hanging by a single strand of hair, all the good and evil karmas of past lives of the patient appear in front of him or her simultaneously. At a time like this, the soul is unable to have self-control and is drifting up and down with his or her good or bad karmas. If one is not being careful with a single misstep, one will end up with a long-lasting suffering. It is absolutely a scary time indeed. If a Buddhist friend luckily happens to be there at that moment, the friend can persuade the patient by skillfully asking the patient first to get rid of everything in his or her mind. Then the friend can advise the patient to have a strong belief and the willingness to be born to the West. At the same time, the friend starts to chant the Buddha's name aloud and asks the patient to do the same. This way, the patient is able to break out from the metal-like karma's formed fence and to be born to the West. The mighty karmas are thus unable to hold him or her as a hostage. However, one should practice the chanting of the name of the Buddha when one is still alive all the time, not wait until the last minute to do so. Then one will be automatically doing the chanting oneself, with or without the help of others when the occasion arises. It is similar to training an army for 1,000 days for the purpose of only one battle. Things to avoid at deathbed: bathing, changing clothes, or moving the patient around. The body starts to break down at the time when the patient is dying. The pain from this process is the same as to skin cattle alive, or cook a live crab in boiling water. With any kind of touching to the patient at this time, he or she will feel the pain as his or her bones are being twisted and broken. If one gives the patient a bath, or changes the clothes, or moves him or her around, it will add more pain to an already extremely suffering body. These maneuvers will certainly cause the dying patient, who has lost the ability to complain, to be really furious and very hateful. If the last thought of a near-death patient is hate, then in his next life he will be born into a poisonous animal. One should realize this is a very horrifying outcome. For example, King Ajatashatru, who was a devout Buddhist who had accumulated a great deal of blessings by building temples and pagodas. For his good deeds he was deemed to be born to heaven. Unfortunately, right before his last breath, his servant dropped a fan onto his face, and the pain made him really angry. Instead of heaven, he was born as a snake in his next life. A child slipped from his mother's hands and fell into water by accident when they were ferrying across a river. She tried in vain to rescue her child from the water. They both drowned. She was thus born into heaven because of her kind act. A last thought of kindness or anger made a difference between heaven and beast, respectively. Sad face, weep or cry, or carrying on some small, intimate conversation. When the deathbed patient sees sorrowful faces from relatives or friends bidding him or her farewell, weeping or crying out loud, there will cause the patient to start to have the feeling of love and passion. Then the recitation of the Buddha is non-existence. Thus the soul will be born by following the heart of love and passion. For example, Sutra said, there was a couple and they loved each other deeply. They both were faithful Buddhists and practiced Buddhism by observing the Buddhist rules and were meatless. One day, the husband died of illness. Right before the husband died, the wife felt very sad and started to cry aloud passionately. The husband naturally developed the thought of love and passion himself. His soul was then born into his wife's nose as a worm. Suddenly, the wife saw that a worm dropped from her nose and tried to kill it by stepping on it. A monk by her side stopped her quickly and said, "Do not hurt your husband." The wife was astonished and asked the monk why. The monk said, "When your husband was alive, he followed the Buddhist precepts faithfully and also was a vegetarian. He was destined to be born into heaven. Because of your passionate crying, he started to have the thought of love and thus was born into your nose as an insect instead." Things to do at deathbed. When the patient's mind is sound and clear, he or she should decide if he or she wants to apply CPR at the time of his or her death. CPR is a very violent procedure Most of the time, electric shock would be used to restart the heartbeat. The patient usually will spring up from the bed when this step is being carried out. For a dying patient, this is an unnecessary extra hurt on top of the unbearable amount of pain he or she is already suffering. As a result, the patient will be really angry and full of hatred. After all the commotions end and the patient fails to survive, then the patient most likely will be born into the three evil divisions of existence: animal, hungry ghost, and hell. Once one is in one of these divisions of existence, it will last about 5,000 big eons before one has a chance to be reincarnated out of it. It will be an awfully long time to have a chance to be reborn as a human being again or in heaven. It is a very frightening event to even think about it. If one decides not to use CPR, the patient needs to inform every family member and to let the hospital know in writing in advance. If the patient is near death, the family member should ask his or her doctor to stop all treatments. Let the patient stay freely with his or her most comfortable position, laying on a bed or sitting on a chair or some other position. After the patient dies, the body should remain there absolutely untouched by anyone for any reason. In case there are some feces or urine on the bed, cover them lightly with a clean sheet. Needles for an IV or other equipment on the patient can be removed when the patient is still alive with minimal disturbance, or leave them there. After at least 8 to 12 hours have passed, the body will be completely cold. Then any medical equipment on the patient can be removed. The family member can start to bathe the patient, change clothes, and then allow crying. If the limbs become stiff, one can wrap hot wet towels around the joints. After a while, the limbs are able to move freely. When the patient's life is near the end, a painting of Buddha Amitabha should be placed in a location which the patient is able to see. Then gently ask the patient to clear all sorts of thoughts from his or her mind and start to follow the reciting of the name of Buddha Amita with a small voice. In order to save the patient's strength, it is all right to chant only Amitofo, 4 words. However, every word, each name, must be chanted distinctly, listening to them clearly through one's ears and asking the patient to do the same. In case the patient is too weak to recite, then ask the patient to listen to each word, each name, clearly through his or her ears. This process is called the heart is working toward a Buddha. Let the pure recitation continue. It will slowly attain the status of the heart is the Buddha. Then a secular heart is thus transformed into a Buddhist heart. He or she, together with his or her karmas, will certainly be born in the West. Sutra said, during the Dharma ending age of the Buddhism, there are billions and billions of people practicing Buddhism. Very rarely have people succeeded. The recitation of Buddha Amita is the only way to set free one's birth and death. Venerable Huang Nian Zhu said, if one does not practice the ocean-like vows of Buddha Amitabha and wants to terminate one's birth and death in his present life, I can say it boldly, absolutely hopeless. The ancient as well as the modern Buddhist scholars all made the same conclusion. All of them praise very highly the PURELAND school as well. Grand Master Shantou said, Buddha Shakyamuni was born with the sole purpose to preach Buddha Amitabha's ocean-like vows. To find an assisting recitation group nowadays is difficult. If there are not enough people, one may consider playing the pre-recorded Buddha chanting CD. One has to realize it is necessary that people are needed to chant together along with the recording. People ought to divide into groups and take turns chanting along with the CD player. It is useless if one plays only the CD by itself. The CD player does not have a heart, and then there is no power that can be generated from a heartless machine. The player is used only for the purpose of reminding people to chant the name of the Buddha. It also helps to control the speed, not too fast, not too slow, and the loudness, not too loud, not too low. For the benefit of the soul, one needs only to recite the name of the Buddha. One does not have to read sutras, perform the ceremony of repentance, or other Buddhist events. Grand Master Yin Huang said, one chant of the name of the Buddha is equal to the contents of all sutras and nothing less. The Master also stated, one chant of the Buddha Amitabha is very mysterious and beyond the capacity of the ordinary people to comprehend. It is only understood completely by the status of a Buddha. Even the highest Bodhisattvas are unable to understand fully. Therefore we, the secular beings, the only choice we have is to believe what we have been taught respectfully and practice accordingly. Sutra said, belief is the head of Tao and the mother of merit. Bardo body and Bardo period. If one has the belief, the willingness, recites the name of the Buddha, and asks to be born in the Western happiest world, definitely one's wish will become true. Whoever practices the 10 best deeds faithfully, he or she will be born in heaven in the next life. Those who committed the most serious sins, certainly he or she will be fallen to hell. The souls in these 3 cases will be born to their respective places instantly after they die. No Bardo bodies and intermediate existence between death and reincarnations are formed. All others, if one's good and bad deeds are equal, or both are relatively bad, the soul is not going anywhere and suddenly becomes a shape-like figure. It is called a Bardo body, or more commonly called a ghost, or a soul, or spirit. It has a height of 3 feet and has sharp 6 roots, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. It moves very fast and can pass all obstacles. However, most of the time, the Bardo body is in a dizzy, sleepy, and muddle-headed state. Sometimes, the body has a clear mind and knows that he or she is already dead. Thus, the soul is in deep anxiety, but has no idea what. At the same time, the Bardo body sees all sorts of self-karmas induce frightening situations and conditions surrounding him or her. Therefore, the spirit is extremely scared, agitated, trying his or her best to avoid them, and above all is trying awfully hard to find a safe place to hide. The Bardo period is about 49 days for the longest. Some are reborn after 7, 14, 21 days, depending on each individual's karma. How to verify the whereabouts of the soul. Sutra stated, exit from the top of the head is a saint, and from the eyes is born to heaven. Departure from the heart comes out as a human being, and the abdomen is a hungry ghost. Animal leaves from the kneecap, and hell departs from the soul. When a person is about to die, if the warm air in his or her body goes up from below, it is a sign that this person may be reborn in the ascending classes, the West Paradise, heaven, or human. If the warm air goes down from the top, then the person may fall into the descending classes, animal, hungry, ghost, or purgatory. After the body has completely cooled down, if the top of the head is the only spot feeling warm, then one is born into the Western happiest world. If the warm spot is around the eyes or forehead, one is born to heaven. If the spot is around the heart, this soul ends up as a human being again. In case the spot is around the abdomen, then one is born as a hungry ghost. If the spot is in the vicinity of the kneecap, then this bardo body is born as a beast. In case the warm spot is in the soul is sunk to hell. These are all predetermined according to the good or evil karmas each person has performed. Although one may find the whereabouts of the deceased in the next life, one should refrain from touching the body too often. Any kind of contact will result in a great deal of hardship to the patient if the soul is still inside the body. These actions will cause a lot of pain and hatred. Thus the person may unfortunately lose a chance to be born in the West. What to do afterward? Recitation of the name of the Buddha. One should continue to assist the bardo body to be born in the Western happiest world. Family members and friends should still take turns to chant the Buddha's name for the entire bardo period. If it is possible, the sound of the recitation should be carried out 24 hours a day. Sutra said, the bardo body will receive 1/7 of the merits gathered from the recitation of the Buddha and or other Buddhist events performed by the family members. The remaining merits, 6/7, belong to the family members who perform these rituals. Therefore, the amount of chanting of the Buddha's name is the more, the better for the deceased. The bardo body can hear the sound of the recitation. Because of this, the scared, agitated, and anxious bardo body is able to transfer into a peaceful and joyous one. From the inconceivable powers of the Buddha, from the Dharma, and from the hearts of these people who do the chanting, the bardo body is then able to be born to the West. For those who were reciting the Buddha's name regularly when they were alive, the assisting recitation will enable them to gain a higher status once they are born in the Western happiest world. The merits gathered from the recitation of the Buddha have to offer to the deceased and also toward all. As an example, we offer all the merits and blessings resulting from the recitation of the Buddha Amita to so and so, name of the deceased, and toward all. We wish everyone will be able to be born in the West as well. Each group should do it once in the beginning, and more importantly, when it is finished with the recitation. If the deceased previous religious belief is Taoism or Christianity or Muslim or any other religion, the mortal body will not be able to receive any benefits from his or her family members who say a prayer or perform any services according to these religions, because human being and heavenly being, attained goal of other religions, represent 2 of the 6 divisions of existence and are still subjected to reincarnation. Be a vegetarian, no alcohol, no killing, no sex, and no edible pungent plants. All the offerings to the deceased should all be vegetarian foods. During the Bardo period, there will be no meat, no sex, no alcohol, no killing, and no foods containing pungent plants. Any kind killing related to the funeral service is prohibited. Killing for this purpose will count as a bad karma for the deceased, and in turn, it will worsen the already miserable soul. It will quicken the fall to the 3 bad divisions of existence. Those who chant the name of the Buddha are under the constant care and protection from all Buddha. Buddha Amitabha will send 25 Bodhisattvas to protect and guard everyone who chants the name of the Buddha. In addition, they are also looked after by the dragons and celestial beings. Therefore, everyone is well protected against any trouble from the evil spirits or devils. The Surangama Sutra said, the 5 edible pungent vegetables will have a Viagra-like effect when they are cooked. If people eat them raw, it will increase their anger. For those who eat these plants in their meals regularly and also try to attain the status of samadhi, the bodhisattvas, heavenly beings, and good gods from all directions will be unable to guard them. They cannot stand the strong, foul, obnoxious smell of those plants. Then the powerful king of the devil will take advantage of the situation and come to preach in disguise as a Buddha. All Buddhist practitioners should not include these plants in their diet. Everything involving the funeral service ought to be simple and frugal. Use old clothes for the deceased instead of new ones. It is unnecessary to buy an expensive casket. The family members must treasure and conserve the deceased hard-earned blessings. Lavish funeral spending is bad for the dead. Grand Master Yin Guang said, in case the funeral expenses are extravagant, it may not cause a natural disaster, but it is certainly going to have man-made tragedy. The offspring should pay much more attention to where the Bardo body is reborn into. The family members must not pay too much attention to what other people may think of them. If one can donate the money saved from the service to a charity organization anonymously, it is considered a much better alternative. Conclusion. For the purpose of brevity and simplicity, the above edited article may not have all the information to make it clear enough. If there are mistakes in it, respectfully please let me know. In case one wants to know more about this subject, please go to the Amita Society, where one can find books related to this topic to read, or one can look up in the website www.bfnn.org in Chinese, unfortunately. For more information, the painting of the 3 Western saints and CD for the recitation of the name of the Buddha can also be found at the Amita Society or any monastery, or you can record one yourself if you prefer.